The clothesline snapped back and forth in the wind, though no laundry had hung there in weeks. Sand blew sideways across the yard like smoke, dusting the porch steps and piling up in corners where Harold used to leave his boots. Lorraine Parker stood in the doorway, her hand on the frame, not quite ready to step outside. The sea was roaring louder than usual, not angry, but relentless. She hadn't walked the beach since the funeral. It was their place, and now it felt too big, too empty. Even the gulls had disappeared this morning, swallowed by the storm rolling off the Atlantic. The clouds looked low enough to touch. She sipped from her chipped mug, but the coffee had gone cold. That's when she saw it, a tangled shape half buried in seaweed and driftwood just beyond the dune grass. At first, she thought it was trash. Maybe a sack, maybe a bundle of rope. Storms always left behind messes no one wanted to claim. But then it moved. Barely, just a twitch like something shivering under a wet blanket. Lorraine narrowed her eyes. The wind pulled her scarf off her shoulder as she stepped off the porch. Her knees ached with every step, but she kept walking. Closer now, she could see fur, matted, soaked through, clinging to a trembling body. It was a cat, no collar. No sign of how it had gotten there, only that it had. It looked too small to have survived the night, but somehow it had. She knelt slowly, letting her knees sink into the wet sand. The cat didn't hiss, didn't run, didn't even lift its head. Just a soft, broken sound escaped from its throat, more breath than meow. Lorraine reached out a cautious hand, unsure if it was trust or exhaustion keeping the animal still. Its fur was cold and gritty with sand. She'd never been a cat person. Harold was allergic, and they'd always said maybe a dog someday, once they traveled less. But this creature wasn't asking for anything except warmth. She wrapped it in her shawl like it was made of glass. It didn't resist. Back inside, she laid it on an old towel by the heater. The storm rattled the windows, but the house suddenly felt less hollow. Lorraine moved gently, setting a bowl of water near its head, unsure if it could even drink. It blinked once, eyes clouded but open. "You're not supposed to be here," she whispered, though the words came out softer than she intended. The cat's breathing was shallow, but steady. She pulled a second towel from the linen drawer, tucked it around the creature's back legs. The heater hummed quietly. For the first time in months, so did something else. A flicker of responsibility. She sat down in Harold's old chair, the one that still faced the window. The cat didn't move. Outside, the sky darkened to near night, even though it was only morning. Lorraine stared at the firewood basket, at the empty coat hook, at the life that hadn't known what to do with itself since he left. Her eyes welled, uninvited. Grief was like that, sneaking up during the smallest moments. She wiped her cheek with her sleeve and glanced down again. The cat was still breathing. That was someone. And she wasn't alone in the room anymore. She didn't sleep that night, just watched the storm peel across the coast through the window. The cat hadn't moved. Once or twice it stirred, a tiny paw twitch, a shift of weight, but mostly it rested like it had given its last bit of strength just to get to her doorstep. She made tea at 2 a.m., sat on the floor beside it, talked a little. Not about anything important, just to fill the silence. She told it about Harold, about the beach they loved, about the silence she hated. She didn't expect a response. But the cat opened its eyes and blinked once, slow. By sunrise, the wind had finally settled. The sea was quiet again, all that fury pulled back into the tide like it had never happened. Lorraine carried the towel and the cat to the front porch. The air smelled of salt and wet pine. The cat nestled deeper into the cloth. Its eyes were more alert now, though it still didn't try to run. "You're a mystery," she said, brushing sand from its ears. "A soggy, fragile little mystery." It licked its paw once, then placed it gently on her leg. That simple touch cracked something open inside her. She didn't flinch. She exhaled. She thought maybe it would leave. Cats did that. They showed up, took what they needed, and vanished when they were done. But this one didn't move. It stayed on her lap while the waves whispered behind them. Lorraine leaned back against the porch rail, letting the sun find her face. "You can stay," she said quietly, "just until you're strong enough." The cat closed its eyes. She wasn't sure if she was saying it for the cat or for herself. For the first time in months, she didn't mind the sound of the sea. But when she looked out at the shoreline again, her heart skipped. Because there was another shape farther down the beach, something she hadn't noticed before, and it was moving. Lorraine tightened the shawl around her shoulders as she stepped off the porch, careful not to disturb the cat still dozing on the cushion. The second shape was down past the driftwood line, near the spot where Harold used to fish for sea trout on quiet mornings. It moved oddly, not steady like a person, not smooth like an animal. Her boots sank into the damp sand with each step. The wind had calmed, but the beach still carried the aftermath of the storm. Torn kelp, scattered shells, waterlogged debris. The figure took form slowly. It wasn't a person. It wasn't walking at all. It was crawling. Her breath caught. For a second, she thought it was another animal, injured, maybe worse. But as she neared, the figure became clearer. It was a cat. Bigger than the first. Darker. Its fur soaked and tangled. One paw dragging behind like it was broken or numb. Lorraine crouched again, her joints protesting. The cat hissed, weakly, baring teeth it clearly didn't have the strength to use. "It's okay," she whispered, though she didn't believe it herself. There was a sharpness in this one. Not fear, defense. Not everyone washed ashore looking for help. She took off her cardigan and held it like a sling. The cat hissed again, then collapsed mid-snarl, its body folding into itself. It was done fighting. Lorraine scooped it carefully, heart pounding at the weight of it. Heavier than the first, but just as fragile. Something about the way it breathed reminded her of the early days in hospice. That slow, uneven rhythm. The kind of sound that stayed in your ears long after it stopped. She walked slower on the way back. The tide was creeping closer to her feet. In her mind, Harold's voice spoke. Calm, practical, one step at a time more. Inside, she placed the second cat beside the first, layering a new towel across its shivering body. The first one stirred, stretched a paw toward the newcomer, then tucked its head back down as if to say, "So it's not just me." Lorraine watched them both, unsure what she'd invited into her home, but too moved to stop it now. There was something broken in them, something she recognized. The second cat's leg looked bad. She'd need help. She hadn't spoken to Dr. Mitchell since Harold's fall, but he still ran the vet clinic out on Harbor Road. If he answered her call, she dialed with shaking fingers. The last time she heard his voice was when they called to return Harold's wallet, found in the air parking lot after the paramedics left. The phone rang twice. "Mitchell Veterinary," came the familiar tone, warm and tired. Lorraine hesitated. "This is Lorraine Parker," she said, and there was silence on the other end, just for a moment. "Lorraine," he said gently, "what can I do for you?" She didn't explain everything. Just that she'd found 2 cats, injured, wet, shivering, and she didn't know what else to do. He said, "Bring them." "I'll be here." The drive was slow. She lined a laundry basket with towels and placed both cats inside, careful to wedge them so the second wouldn't jostle its leg. Rain still misted the windshield and the wipers squeaked like an old memory. The clinic was quiet when she arrived. Dr. Mitchell opened the door himself, older than she remembered, but just as kind-eyed. "Well," he said, peering in the basket, "you've had quite the morning." Lorraine almost smiled, almost. "They washed up," she said. He nodded like that made perfect sense. Storm like that, sometimes things don't wash away. They wash too. She sat in the waiting room while he worked, hands folded tight in her lap. The clinic smelled like iodine and cedar shavings, exactly as it had the last time she was there, the day they put down Harold's old hunting dog. 10 years ago. A memory she hadn't invited crawled up the back of her throat. She pressed her knuckles to her lips. When Mitchell finally returned, his brow was furrowed. "The gray one'll be fine. Bit malnourished. Just rest and food." Lorraine nodded. "The other?" He paused. "Broken leg, but it's not recent. He's been living with it for a while," she repeated softly. Mitchell smiled. "Yeah, both males. Strays, by the look of them. Probably siblings. Same coat pattern, same eyes." Lorraine stared at the basket, where one cat now slept curled into the other. She hadn't noticed that before, the matching eyes. A pale green-gray, almost foggy in the light. "He'll need care," Mitchell continued. "Splint, antibiotics, maybe some therapy. He's got fight in him, though." Lorraine didn't answer right away. Her heart ached in a strange, unfamiliar way. Not from pain exactly, from possibility. Like something in her was reaching up from the dark. She drove home with the basket on the passenger seat. The heater blew gently. The cats didn't stir. She glanced at them, then back to the road, just as a patch of sunlight cracked through the clouds. A quiet filled the car, different than the kind that haunted the house. This one was shared. On the dashboard, Harold's old pine-scented air freshener swung slightly on its string. Lorraine blinked slowly, her eyes burning. She didn't speak out loud. She didn't need to. The wind shifted outside, and when she pulled into the driveway, something else shifted too, in the basket. Because this time, the smaller cat wasn't asleep. It was staring at her and purring. The cottage was warmer now, not just from the fire but from something quieter. Lorraine laid the cats on a folded quilt by the fireplace. Close but not crowded. The smaller one, the first, curled tight into himself like a question mark. The larger one, still stiff from the vet's work, watched the flames flicker with heavy eyes. She brewed a fresh pot of tea. Not for the caffeine, just for the ritual. Steam rose into the kitchen light, curling around her as she moved slower than she used to, but more intentionally than before. They hadn't left. That meant something. She didn't name them right away. Names meant you were keeping something. Names meant permanence. She tried Kitty a few times, then shook her head. Harold would have made a joke something corny, probably nautical. Barnacle, maybe, or bosun. She smiled at the thought, surprising herself. It was the first time she'd smiled without guilt in months. The little one nuzzled his face into the blanket, still too tired to play, but calmer now. The bigger one didn't like to be touched, not yet, but he didn't hiss anymore either. That was progress. That was enough for today. The vet had given her a packet of antibiotics and a list of things to monitor. It's like caring for someone learning how to trust all over again, he'd said. Lorraine understood that more than she wanted to admit. She remembered how hard it was to get out of bed after Harold was gone. How everything felt like walking through water. She saw it now in the way the cats moved, slow, cautious, unsure if they were safe. Grief looked different on everyone. But it always left the same shadows. She knew those shadows by name. And she knew what it meant to fight them. She left the radio on low, soft classical music, filling the spaces where silence used to scream. Rain tapped gently at the window like it was asking permission this time. The fire crackled, one log collapsing into embers. She sat beside them on the floor, a book open in her lap but unread. Her eyes kept drifting to the cats. The way the smaller one's ears twitched when a violin note hit just right. The way the bigger one tried awkwardly to shift his weight without using the injured leg. "You need a name," she whispered. "Can't keep calling you, hey you." The larger cat looked up then, blinking slow. She didn't know why it came to her, but it did. "Anchor," she said softly. It landed in the room like a stone in still water. Solid. Right. The cat didn't react, but somehow it fit. Heavy, grounded, scarred but steady. Anchor. She looked at the smaller one, still curled in on himself like he was trying to disappear. "And you?" She began, then paused. Maybe drift. He didn't lift his head, but his tail gave a soft, single flick, as if he'd accepted it. Anchor and drift, two things the sea gave back to her. She started talking to them more after that. Not just chatter, but real words. Mornings began with quiet greetings and updates on the weather. Evenings ended with soft recaps of her day, whether or not they listened. "You two eat better than I do," she muttered one night, watching them lap at the warmed chicken broth she'd made. Drift climbed onto her lap for the first time that same night. His body light as memory, eyes closed as soon as he settled. She held her breath for minutes, afraid to move. Anchor watched from the hearth, silent but present. Guarded. 2 weeks passed. Drift healed fast young bones, the vet said. Anchor slower, but Lorraine noticed a change in him too. He followed her from room to room, never close enough to touch, but always there. She started leaving the bedroom door open at night. The third morning, she woke to find him sleeping at the foot of her bed. She didn't say anything. Just reached down slowly and rested her fingers near his paw. He didn't pull away. That afternoon, she lit a candle by Harold's photo. "Thought you should know," she said. "There's life in this house again." That night, while washing dishes, she heard something unusual. Not a meow, not a purr. A sound like nails tapping across the floorboards. She dried her hands and stepped into the hallway. Anchor was at the far end, tail high, staring at the front door. Drift sat behind him, ears low. Lorraine felt it before she saw it, some shift in the air, like something outside was waiting. The porch light buzzed faintly. And she saw it. Just beyond the glass, barely visible in the dark, a pair of golden eyes blinking slowly. Not cat eyes. Not glowing, just watching. She reached for the door handle but stopped, because the eyes were familiar. And they didn't belong to any animal. She didn't open the door right away. Lorraine stood still, heart slow and heavy, the kind of rhythm that only comes with memory. The porch light flickered once, then steadied. Outside, the figure stepped forward, not a stranger, but a man in a soaked windbreaker, hair flattened by rain. For a second, she thought she was dreaming. But then he raised a hand, hesitant, not quite waving. "Sorry," he called gently through the glass. "I think I lost something. Or maybe they lost me." His voice cracked on the last word. Drift meowed softly behind her. She opened the door just enough to see his face. Young, mid-30s, maybe, eyes tired, coat frayed at the sleeves. He didn't smell of alcohol or desperation, just sea and salt and something old, like regret. "They washed up after the storm," Lorraine said carefully. "I didn't know they belonged to anyone," the man nodded. "I've been living out of a van up near the bluff. Got caught in the storm. They ran. I thought I'd never see them again." He looked past her, eyes glassy. "Drift always runs, Anchor. He doesn't forgive easy." She stepped aside. Anchor remained still, his body tense but not retreating. Drift trotted forward, meowing as if scolding the man for being late. The man knelt and opened his arms. Not quickly, just wide enough. Drift slid into them like he belonged there. Anchor didn't move. Lorraine watched as the man's eyes filled. "I rescued them 6 years ago. From a flood in Mississippi." His voice dropped. "Back when I still had a house, a job, a plan." He didn't elaborate. Lorraine didn't ask. Some wounds didn't need retelling to be understood. She knew what it was to lose a world. "Thank you," he said, simple, raw. "I didn't think anyone would have kept them safe." Lorraine looked down at Anchor, still unmoving. "He's hurt," she said. "Leg ribs, maybe more. But he's still got a lot of fight." The man reached out his hand, palm up. Anchor's ears flicked. His nose twitched, but he stayed where he was. "He doesn't trust easy," she added, "and I don't blame him." The man nodded. "Neither do I." Lorraine watched the standoff, breath held. Then Anchor did something unexpected. He stood, limped forward, and touched his head briefly to the man's fingers. Just once. Lorraine turned away, walked to the kitchen without a word. Made tea again. Though her hands shook slightly, she poured a third cup without thinking. Set it on the table. The man didn't sit at first, just hovered near the cats, unsure if he was welcome. "You fed them," he said softly. "You held on to them," Lorraine finally spoke. "They held on to me too." He sat. Drift jumped into his lap, Anchor curled by his foot. The wind outside had stilled completely. Just a quiet rustle in the reeds. "I don't have much," he said. "Not even a place to take them." "You have them," she replied. "That's a start." Silence settled over the room like an old quilt. Lorraine looked around, at the fire, the worn rugs, the empty coat rack. It didn't feel as hollow now, not like before. "There's space here," she said finally. "The back room hasn't been used in years. And someone should carry the wood in before winter." He looked up, startled. "Are you sure?" She nodded, steady now. "They chose you first, but for a while, they chose me. That has to mean something." He stared down at the cats. "They always know," he whispered. In the days that followed, the man, his name was Tyler, settled into the rhythm of the cottage like a missing piece. He fixed the shed door, brought back firewood, replaced the broken porch light. He never talked much about where he'd been. Lorraine never asked. They shared chores, meals, small silences. Drift returned to mischief, climbing curtains and stealing socks. Anchor slept near the window, always facing the sea. One morning, Lorraine found a photo in a worn wallet Tyler had left on the table. A younger version of him, holding 2 tiny kittens, their eyes fog-gray. The tide began retreating a little each day, and with it, the weight Lorraine had carried alone. She still lit a candle for Harold each night. Still sat by his chair, but she no longer felt like she was speaking into a void. One afternoon, she walked the beach with Tyler. Drift bounding ahead, Anchor pacing behind, slow but steady. She bent down, picked up a bit of driftwood shaped like a heart. Tyler smiled. funny what the sea gives back," he said. Lorraine looked out at the horizon. "Sometimes," she said, "it doesn't give back what we lost, just what we need." As they climbed the porch steps, the wind picked up, playful this time. Drift chased a leaf across the yard. Anchor stopped and looked out at the water, not afraid, just remembering. Lorraine reached the door first, then turned to wait for them all. For once, no one lagged behind. No one had to be carried. Inside, the fire waited, and so did everything else. Warmth, safety, a second chance. Tyler touched the doorframe lightly, almost reverently, before stepping in. Lorraine noticed. But she didn't say a word. She just smiled. Because this time, when the storm came, no one was alone.